Look at how gorgeous this calyx is. Hi, Kim here, Olive City Oasis in Northern California, Zone 9B. It's the last week of October, and it is definitely time to harvest my red Roselle Hibiscus. I have it all over the garden. I planted it in the ground, in raised beds, in containers. I've just grown so much of it this year, and yeah, it's definitely time to start harvesting it all. Actually, I harvested my first round about 2 weeks ago, but there is a ton to harvest today. So I thought I'd take you along with me as I share with you the 6 big, important, wonderful reasons you should grow red Roselle Hibiscus too. And before we start harvesting, I did want to share with you that there are many names for red Roselle Hibiscus. I usually call it red Roselle Hibiscus, but I will also call it Rosella or red Roselle. Those are its 3 probably most common names. Its scientific name is Hibiscus sabdarifa, and it is originally from West Africa and traditionally commonly still grown in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. But more and more, we're seeing it pop up and being grown consciously by gardeners all across the US, Canada, and Europe. It's in the Malvaceae family, I think that's how you say that, and also in that family are cotton and okra. So, if you have noticed a similarity in the appearance of the red Roselle Hibiscus flowers and the flowers of okra, well, you're not wrong. They're sort of like cousins. So what are some of the other names that red Roselle Hibiscus commonly goes by? Well, you'll often hear it referred to as Jamaican sorrel, red sorrel, and Florida cranberry, but some of its lesser known aliases are Indian red sorrel, lemon bush, and sour. And in Spanish, you'll hear it called jamaica. But now it is time to get harvesting because I have so much of this stuff that I need to dry and freeze and bake with and make jams with. And yeah, we'll get to all that. So come on, let's get going with the harvest. So the first reason to grow red Roselle Hibiscus is that it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, take a look at these maroon stems. Just awesome, aren't they? And then we have these deep green leaves and the calyxes. Incredibly beautiful from afar or up close. And of course there's the flower that blooms for just a day, but is so lovely. I'll put a picture here for you since these are all done blooming at the moment. But yeah, red Roselle Hibiscus. It is so beautiful. You can plant it right in with your flowers if you'd like. Personally though, I love it mixed in with all my veggies and herbs. It really brightens up the garden and brings in all sorts of pollinators. So the second reason to grow red Roselle Hibiscus is that they're super easy to grow. They germinate very quickly and you can grow them in pretty much any kind of soil. As I mentioned, I grew them this year in raised beds, in the ground, in containers. They don't need any special kind of soil. They take full sun, they take part sun. They actually only take a moderate amount of water. Wow, look at this big one here. So you can grow red Roselle Hibiscus in zones 3 to zones 11. And they're very vigorous growers. They also don't mind fall weather. So I actually started mine later than usual this year. I usually start them in the spring, but they really take off once the heat hits. I'm going to cut a couple of these stems off at the base and just go from there. I think it'll be a lot easier. So yeah, really easy growers. Plus, they're very disease and pest resistant. So here's an example of a calyx that has the dead flower petals dried up, still attached. Well, loosely attached. And as I brush it, it comes right off. As opposed to right down here, this is one I found where the bloom hasn't yet opened. And if you're looking at this in person, you can see that the petals are still, soft and moist. They're not dried up. This hasn't bloomed yet. And the red Roselle Hibiscus flowers only open for 1 day, usually, max 2. And that is when the calyxes are ready for you to harvest, about 7 to 10 days after the bloom has happened. Many of my calyxes look like this one. Yep. But sometimes, just occasionally, they look more like this, where not all of the different sepals, I think is the word, of the calyx have opened up. This one was almost completely closed up. I thought it was until I turned it sideways. There's one part there that's popped out. But I'd say 90% of mine are wide open like that, or pretty close to it. Still, when you're harvesting, the only thing you really need to not harvest are ones that are soft, shriveled, or just too small. This one is, well, all three, soft, shriveled, and too small. And as you can see, you will get stained temporarily when harvesting these because, yeah, they are used as food coloring. So these ones that I'm working on harvesting now, they are in one raised bed, and I've already harvested 2 big containers, and I've got at least 2 or 3 times that much left to harvest here. And harvesting is as simple as cutting right beneath the calyx, and they just come right off, super simple. Now, the third reason that you definitely want to try growing red Roselle Hibiscus is that they have such a great flavor, and it's really unique. It's a vibrant, tangy flavor, has strong elements of citrus in it, but I find it also has notes of, say, blackberry, in addition to what most people think of as a cranberry flavor. So it makes a fantastic jam because of this flavor, as well as a great addition to things like scones. So here I have about 6 red Roselle plants crowded into a little area about 1.5 feet across, I'd say, next to my steps. And they've done really well here, although you can see some lying on the ground. That's because they're just weighted down with these massive roselles. Definitely ready to be harvested now. Yeah, these dry flowers just come right out, and there's that gorgeous calyx ready to go. The fourth reason that you should, in my opinion, try growing red Roselle Hibiscus is that they're so versatile. These calyxes can be used so many ways. Yes, you can make jam like I mentioned, and I'll link a video I did a year or 2 ago to where I made jam with the red Rosella. And I'll also link another video at the end of this video that goes back to a red Roselle Hibiscus video I did where I baked scones with these calyxes. But the thing is that the main use for these calyxes commercially is to make tea. The mature calyxes are dried and then they're ground into a powder that you can be using for tea. And this is what you'll find if you go to the store and you look at any of the commercial teas that are labeled like berry tea or wild berry zinger, things like that. If you look at the list of ingredients, it will say some version of red Roselle Hibiscus. But it's so easy to dry these yourself, whether in a dehydrator like I do, or in the oven like I used to do. Maybe even better than either of those options is to dry the calyxes outdoors with a little bit of tulle around them, or they do have some hanging outdoor dehydrators, as it were, where you put the whatever you're trying to dry, in this case the calyxes here, inside of a zipped up netted compartment to keep critters off of them. But in any case, drying them outside, you're saving the energy, and they dry pretty fast that way. And I've had great success with all 3 ways. Another very convenient way I found of storing these is to freeze them. So I can just take them in the house, rinse them off, and throw them in the freezer. And then when I have more time available, I can take them out and do with them whatever I wish, which I admit is usually jam. However, I've also developed quite a liking for the tea, and I really enjoy it both hot and cold. It's super cozy to, snuggle up in the late autumn or winter next to the fire with a good book and a nice steaming cup of this hot Rosella tea. But in the summer, it's great iced. I mean, absolutely wonderful. And if you throw in a little something, extra, that is always especially nice. Now, this holiday season, I'm also going to be trying out a recipe that I made once before. It was so good. I might try a variation of it this time. And that is to make a stuffing with it, or dressing as some people call it. You can imagine how good that would be because you've probably heard of dressings made with cranberries, right? But red Roselle Hibiscus, similar to cranberry, but with that added extra zing, that special flavor that's only red Roselle. The other thing a lot of people don't know is that the leaves of the red Roselle are a wonderful alternative to spinach. Very tasty, especially the younger, smaller leaves. Absolutely try them if you never have before. I think you will be so pleasantly surprised, and you'll have all the greens you possibly could need ever. So I have already touched on the fifth reason to grow red Roselle Hibiscus, and that is that they're so easy to harvest. I mean, compared to a fruit tree that you've got to get a ladder for unless you keep it regularly pruned, which I highly suggest, by the way, or compared to some things that when you harvest, you have to deal with thorns. I'm talking about, blackberries and such. Red Roselle Hibiscus, on the other hand, don't have any thorns, and they are at a very convenient height, and you're going to be just fine and quickly be able to harvest everything you want. I see a ladybug. Hello, ladybug. But really, all you're doing is taking your cutting tool, putting it right under the bottom of the calyx and cutting. It can't get much simpler than that. And as far as telling when they're ready to harvest, well, like I said, 7 to 10 days after the flower has bloomed, the calyx is ready. But even if you don't know when it bloomed, and you often won't if you're growing a lot of these, you usually won't, you can tell by how big the calyxes are. We can have small ones, medium ones, medium large, and pretty large now. And then there are a few in here that border on gargantuan. But whether you take the flower 3 or 4 days after the bloom or a full 10 to 12 days, it will still be great. Sure, 7 to 10 days after bloom is ideal. But what you're really gaining over time is size. So, the longer you leave it on the plant, generally the bigger it grows, and therefore the more use you get out of it. However, sometimes, say when fall's coming on strong, you're going to want to get them all off early, as I am today. Or maybe you're going out of town and you need to get them off. So that's fine. As long as that bloom has been gone for a few days, you can take them and they're going to be great. And the other thing you don't want to do, though, is leave them on too long, like I mentioned, because then they will start to go soft and saggy and sad, and then they don't taste good or preserve well at all. And that leads me to the last great 6th reason to grow red Roselle Hibiscus. They're so easy to preserve. And I've already mentioned this, but I will mention it again because it is worth re-mentioning, and that is freezing and drying are so simple. Wow, that is a huge one. So yeah, I'm going to throw most of these in the freezer when I go in the house, but I'm far from done. I have so many more to harvest. So for those of you who have stuck around to the end, here's a bonus for you. Not only are these red Roselle Hibiscus delicious, but they're full of vitamin A, vitamin C, magnesium, iron, and they're great diuretics and laxatives. So on top of being fantastic tasting, they're super good for you. So if you look close, you can see lots of smaller calyxes that I've left on the plants. That's because they're going to get larger, and even if they just get one more week on the plants, well, I'm going to have a lot more red Roselle to harvest. You know, these plants did so well everywhere I put them, in containers, raised beds, in the ground, full sun, partial sun, morning sun, afternoon sun, wherever I put them. Even they did well planting them late. Some I didn't plant until July. And still they're all producing tremendously. So they did so well that I am definitely going to plant some of them now in my front yard next year with my flowers, because they're going to be gorgeous. And you know, you just can't have too much red Roselle for all the lovely things that you can make with it. Well, I didn't even get to my container grown red Rosella, and I have so much here. I cannot wait to rinse these, dry these, freeze these, and bake with these, and cook with these. It's going to be so much fun. Definitely one of the easiest, prettiest, most prolific plants that I've ever grown. I highly recommend it. So thanks for joining me for the red Roselle harvest today. So yes, in my next video, I plan to do another garden tour. Hoping it'll be end of October, but who knows, it might be the very first week of November. But I do have a lot still to harvest here in the garden. Things are still growing pretty well for the most part. We really haven't had any cold weather yet. The coolest it's been is the mid-70s. So yeah, I guess it will come sooner or later, but until then, I'm still growing and harvesting in the garden. So until next time, happy growing, or if you're somewhere where you're not able to be in your garden this time of year, then happy dreaming and planning for your next garden season. It is definitely time to harvest my red Roselle Hibiscus. I want to take you along with me as I harvest it. Hi, Kim here at City Oasis. It is the last week of November. Wow, I've jumped a month ahead. And they just come right off, super simple. They just come right off, super simple. They just come right off, super simple.